Chapter 4:15. She said that she wanted to cooperate with him, but secretly, she just wanted to destroy them. And Jiyu Mujua seemed to have seen through her mind. He had purposely left the Jiyu family out of the picture, as if he would ignore her no matter what she wanted to do. "Where did you go?" The man's gentle voice, with a trace of hoarseness, was just waking up. Hearing this familiar voice, Shin Yueji suddenly turned her head. Feng Joching came out with only a piece of clothing, and his hair was not tied up, a little messy. His fair face in the hazy sky had a different kind of beauty. His black eyes were as gentle as ever, and at this moment, he was looking at her tenderly. Shin Yueji subconsciously lowered her head. "I couldn't sleep, so I got up and strolled in the yard." Speaking of this, she thought of something and hurriedly added, "I didn't eat much last night, so I was suddenly hungry. I originally planned to go to the kitchen to get something to eat, but found that the servants were all asleep, so I planned to go out to buy something alone, but I didn't expect that the shops were closed, so I sat in an inn for a while." She explained everything that needed to be explained in one breath. Accurately, she saw the man's gentle eyebrows shake, and suddenly looked at her with a low smile. Why does Imperial Concubine's eagerness to explain give me the illusion that there is a ghost in her heart? This concubine is just being honest. If I knew this, I wouldn't have slept with father and mother. At such an old age, you are still so kind. Shin Yueji stopped talking in time, covered her mouth, blushed, and secretly squinted at the young emperor who was staring at her. "Your Majesty, you woke up so early. Are you going to return to the palace now?" "I suddenly woke up, and saw that the sky was a little brighter, so I came out to have a look." "So your Majesty is the same as this concubine?" Shin Yueji stepped forward, walked in front of him, and pulled his wide sleeve. "Your Majesty, it's cold outside, let's hurry into the room, what if you get a cold?" Feng Joching let her pull him. After taking a few steps, the man suddenly grabbed her hand and interlocked his fingers with hers. "I had wanted Imperial Consort to stay in the manor for a few more days, but Jun has been away from the palace for so long, and there are a lot of trivial matters in the court that Jun has to deal with. Your Majesty, this concubine understands. As the Emperor of Feng Country, Your Majesty is always busy with official business. Your Majesty has already given this concubine a few days to accompany father and mother. This concubine is already very satisfied." She leaned on the man's shoulder, her small face slightly red. "Your Majesty treats this subject's concubine well, this subject's concubine knows. Your Majesty does not need to blame yourself." The man pinched her nose and said, "It's good that you know it. I really don't want to make you feel wronged." The man's palm was dry and warm. When his smooth fingers pinched her nose, his movements were extremely gentle, as if he was afraid of hurting her. She followed him back to the house. Shin Yueji poured him a cup of water. "Emperor, this concubine saw the monk you brought back last night." "Oh." The movement of the man's hand paused, and then he took the tea that she handed him as if nothing had happened just now. "Did the imperial concubine see him?" Chapter 4:16. The man smiled and put down the teacup in his hand. In recent days, the rumors about the late empress have been spreading in the court. Jin needs to ask Master Kong Yin to do a ceremony. When he mentioned Jiyu Yuqin, she could see the obvious pain in his eyes. It appeared quickly and disappeared quickly as well. It was fleeting. In Shin Yueji's words, it was just right. Shin Yueji restrained the obscurity in her eyes. Didn't His Majesty say that he doesn't believe in these nonsense? Why? Asking Kong Yin is just an explanation to the people in the palace. The man took a sip of tea. It's dawn. Does Imperial Consort have anything to say to General Shun and Shun Furen? She knew that Feng Joching was giving her a chance to say goodbye to Shun He and Shun Qiu. She hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Father and mother know that His Majesty is going back to the palace today. I will go and remind them. En. After leaving the room, Shin Yueji went all the way to Shun Qiu's room. She saw that both of them were dressed neatly, especially Shun He, who looked high-spirited. She frowned with some dissatisfaction. "Father, did you forget that you are sick? How can His Majesty think that you are really sick when you look like this?" "That's right. It's all your fault. I almost forgot about it." Shun Qiu had been well nourished last night and almost forgot that Shun He's attire was too incompatible. She ordered him to lie on the bed again. Shunhee looked at them worriedly. Daughter, His Majesty is going back to the palace. Do you think His Majesty will be angry if father lies down like this? No, His Majesty knows that father is sick, so he doesn't need to get up to send him off. His Majesty asked me to come here to inform father and mother that there is no need to follow so many rules. His Majesty is going out incognito, so he should go back incognito. Shen Qiu understood her words. All right, mother understands. Jia must be very careful when you go back. This time you are going out with His Majesty. I don't know how that little girl of the Jiyu family will bear a grudge against you. You must be more vigilant. If you can't handle it, then close the palace and wait for father and mother to rush over to save you. Mother Shen's love, whether it was in her heart or in her eyes, was undisguised. Shen Yueji's heart softens. She looks at her mother and smiles. Mother, don't worry. Your daughter will be fine. Not only your daughter, but also the Shen family. As long as your daughter is alive, the Shen family will never fall. Shunhee wiped his tears in relief. Even after she had walked far away, his tears still hadn't stopped. Shen Qiu sat on the bed and looked at the man who usually shed blood on the battlefield without shedding tears. It's all our fault for protecting Jia too well. I don't know what kind of grievances she suffered in the palace, but she suddenly grew up. She felt gratified and sad at the same time. Tell me, what is Jia thinking? I can clearly feel that her dependence on the regent is much deeper than that of the emperor. Why does she still want to enter the palace? Isn't it better to stay at home when you marry the prince regent? What do you know? Our daughter is eating from the bowl while looking at the pot. You have to choose a man like this. You have to try for a long time to see which one is good and which one is suitable. Hearing this, Shen Qiu couldn't help but glare at him. You talk too much. Every day you talk about your big principles. I don't know what kind of nonsense you are talking about. Chapter 417. Speaking of Shen Yukai, Shen Qiu also looked sad. Who do you think our son is like? He's so useless. How good would it be if he was half as good as Jia? He cries for Jia all day long. Who would dare to marry him in the future? Speaking of which, Shen Qiu paused. Old thing, Yukai is not young anymore. Have you thought about it? What kind of woman can you find for him to suppress him? Still able to suppress him? Shunhee rolled his eyes at her. It's good enough that you don't despise him. Although our Shen family is a family of generals and there is no shortage of wives, no woman dares to marry Shen Yukai. When I raised Shuangxi, I planned to take her as my daughter-in-law in the future. Who knew that this little girl was so smart? She knew my plan and immediately followed Jia to pour tea. She also became sworn sisters with Yukai. Thinking of that scene, Shunhee couldn't help but have a headache and scolded Shen Yukai several times. This fool. Li Yingying was finally taken back to the palace by Shen Yueji. When getting on the carriage, she deliberately let Li Yingying ride in the same carriage with them and specially asked Feng Zhouqing for his opinion. The man was reading at that time. After hearing her words, the big palm on the book seemed to pause slightly, and then he chuckled. As you say. After Li Yingying got on the carriage, she bowed carefully and respectfully. And the man also talked and laughed with Shen Yueji as if she didn't exist in the carriage. When it came to calligraphy and some musical skills, she really couldn't compare with Li Yingying. When she signaled Li Yingying to interrupt, the man finally looked at her. Perhaps Li Yingying's answer satisfied Feng Zhouqing. When the man looked at her, there was a gentle smile on his lips. Being stared at by the man like this, Li Yingying couldn't help blushing. The gentle man was like an immortal from the heavens, gentle and elegant. He treated people gently and didn't have the airs of an emperor at all. He was more like a gentle son of a noble family. He treated people warmly and courteously. This concubine also just found out that Miss Li is also the daughter of an illustrious aristocratic family. It's only because of some accidents that your family has fallen into such dire straits. In terms of musical skills, Miss Li is much better than this concubine. The moment their eyes met, Shen Yueji seemed to see her past self in Feng Zhouqing's gentle eyes. She still remembered that when she first met Feng Zhouqing, he had looked at her with this kind of gaze. When a man looked directly at a woman, the woman would feel a little uncomfortable. However, although Feng Jiuqing's gaze was looking at a person, it was not ostentatious and direct. In the depths of his pitch-black eyes, there was a polite smile. From time to time, there would be a faint smile on his gentle lips. Whether it was a beautiful girl or a married woman, his gaze would never make people feel rushed. How could Feng Jiuqing not understand her intentions when faced with her words that had a hidden meaning? He chuckled in a low voice. When did the concubine become as considerate as the empress? Recruiting for the emperor's harem was usually something only the empress would do. Jiyu Yuyin was clearly disgusted by this rule, but she still had to pretend to be magnanimous as she recruited for Feng Jiuqing's harem, taking in all the beautiful women in the world. Chapter 4:18. If your majesty likes it, this concubine, as an imperial concubine, has to do something. Otherwise, your majesty will subconsciously compare this concubine with empress sister and feel that this concubine is not as generous and narrow-minded as empress sister. When did Shen say that? The man slightly raised his eyebrows, and his eyes had already moved away from Li Yingying's charming and pretty face. It fell on Shen Yueji's serious little face. Your majesty, there is an ambush. However, not long after his eyes fell on Shen Yueji's face, the reins of the carriage were suddenly tightened. The horse raised its head and roared, and the carriage shook violently. Li Yingying sat below. After all, she was a weak woman, not like Shen Yueji who came from a family of generals. When the carriage shook violently, her center of gravity was unstable. She didn't know what to hold, and her body subconsciously fell towards Feng Jiuqing. Your Majesty, she exclaimed. The man frowned. One of his hands was holding onto Shen Yueji. The moment he saw her soft body pouncing towards him, his dark eyes wavered. He did not push her away, nor did he take the initiative to reach out to help her. Shen Yueji looked at the man's invisible unfamiliar scene, and the corner of her lips slightly raised. Yes, this was the real Feng Jiuqing. To him, Li Yingying was just a stranger. She had no illustrious identity or background, and all she had was a face that was somewhat similar to hers. If Feng Jiuqing was willing to hold her, it meant that he still had some feelings for her, but he not only didn't, but also waited for her to fall. It was enough to show that the manly demeanor he should have made him unable to push her away. Li Yingying had no background to rely on, so he was too lazy to pay attention to her, even if she had a face that was somewhat similar to his. But for Feng Jiuqing, this was a woman without feelings, even if they had the same face, so what? He could still be so indifferent. Li Yingying was afraid of such a scene. The moment she fell into Feng Jiuqing's arms, she subconsciously hugged the man's waist, and her whole face was buried deep in the man's chest. Your Majesty. Your Majesty. Her voice was soft, trembling, and there was still fear after the shock. The soft and fragrant jade in his arms made the man frown, but he symbolically held her slender waist and comforted her. It's okay. He pushed Li Yingying, who was in his arms, to Shen Yueji beside him and got off the carriage alone. Your Majesty, be careful. Shen Yueji couldn't help but remind him as she watched him get off the carriage. Feng Jiuqing turned around and looked at her. He smiled and nodded slightly in response. This place was Heartbroken Cliff. In the past, it had deepened her feelings for Feng Jiuqing to the point where she had no regrets. The scene from her previous life was about to repeat itself. Even her grip on Li Yingying's arm tightened. Previously, Li Yingying was acting when the horse was frightened. But this time, her hand was really hurting from Shen Yueji's grip. Shen Yueji's grip was really tight and her long nails were digging deep into her flesh. She frowned in pain and said, Your Highness, did I make you unhappy just now? Hearing this, Shen Yueji released her. Seeing that the woman was in so much pain that the color of her pretty little face had almost changed, she seemed to have reacted, and with some guilt, she loosened the shackles on her. Sorry, I lost control of myself for a moment. Did I hurt you? Chapter 4:19. She saw that her wrist was red and bruised. She could imagine how much strength Shen Yuqing used to hold her just now. Thinking of this, she was secretly surprised. How could she lose her composure to such an extent? Does Imperial Consort like His Majesty? That's why you... No. Shin Yueji interrupted her decisively. She was sure that even if she lost her composure because of Feng Joqing, it was not because she liked him. It was because she knew what she was thinking just now. Li Yingying protected her wrist. His Majesty was a rare handsome man. He treated people gently and elegantly. When he talked to people, he looked into her eyes. It did not make people feel that he looked down on her at all. Li Yingying had to admit that she was indeed moved. Even when the horse went out of control just now, it was not because she was afraid, but because it was subconscious. But she did all this according to Shin Yueji's instructions. Didn't Shin Yueji bring her to the palace to seduce the emperor? Although Li Yingying did not understand why Shin Yueji lost her composure just now, she had a woman's intuition that it was because of the emperor. When she raised her head and looked at Shin Yueji again, she found that Shin Yueji's eyes were not on her at all. She did not know when, but she had already lifted the curtain of the carriage and looked outside. Countless black-clothed men descended from the sky, covering the sky and surrounding the carriage. Feng Joqing was surrounded by the men in black, and behind him were the secret guards in brocade clothes she brought. Qiu Yang faced 4 or 5 men in black, but he was not at a disadvantage at all. But as time went by, his strength was consumed and he was wounded in several places. Since her previous life, Shin Yueji rarely saw Feng Joqing show his martial arts in front of so many people. He alone could deal with more than 10 black-clothed men, and he was not inferior at all. Dressed in a white robe, he was as elegant as an immortal. When he was fighting with the black-clothed man, his moves were swift and elegant like the wind. Before the black-clothed man could react, his palm wind was like lightning, quickly ending the black-clothed man's life. The way out of the broken intestine cliff was blocked. At this moment, they were on the highest slope of the broken intestine cliff. The appearance of the black-robed men was like an endless river, coming wave after wave. When the black-robed men were all killed, many more black-robed men appeared out of nowhere. The group of men in black that Feng Joqing brought hiding in the dark had already been injured. Just at this moment, Shin Yueji saw a black-robed man sneaking up on Feng Joqing, who was focused on fighting against the black-robed man. As for the man, it was unclear whether he had noticed it or not. The scene before her eyes overlapped with the scene from her past life. Shin Yueji could even see herself from her past life through the scene before her eyes. When the sword was about to stab Feng Joqing, she shouted desperately to remind the man to be careful. Even she, who had no abdominal muscles, couldn't help but jump down from the carriage to stand in front of him and take the sword for him. This time it was as if the gods were at work. Shin Yueji did not say anything. Halfway through, when Li Yingying was about to say something, she did not forget to grab her arm and cover her mouth with one hand, so that she could not speak. As Shin Yueji expected, the man's snow-white robe was pierced by the sword and his left arm was injured. Blood immediately flowed from his left shoulder. Chapter 420. Shin Yueji decisively put down the curtain of the carriage. Breaking free from her hand, Li Yingying looked at her in disbelief. "Your Highness, just now, there was a sneak attack on the Emperor from behind. Why did you see it? Why didn't you warn the Emperor?" If Shin Yueji didn't warn her, it would be fine. But why did Shin Yueji suddenly reach out to grab her and cover her mouth when she opened her mouth to warn her? For a moment, Li Yingying felt that the woman in front of her hated the Emperor and wanted him to die. This made her think that Shin Yueji lost her composure and scratched her hand when the Emperor hugged her. These two views were different. Hearing this, Shin Yueji raised her eyebrows and didn't show any panic on her face. Doesn't Miss Li know that in this dangerous moment, even if you see it, you can't open your mouth to warn me? What? Li Yingying looked at her in confusion. Shin Yueji looked back at her with a faint smile. If you shout, the Emperor will be distracted. When the Emperor was fighting with the men in black, he was very focused. His martial arts is so high, how could he not know that there was someone behind him? If the Emperor knew, he wouldn't have been stabbed. No matter how high a person's martial arts is, it can't be compared to a large number of people. Does Miss Li know the consequences if you shout? Those men in black are obviously going to attack the Emperor and don't know that there is someone else in the carriage. No matter what, the Emperor will not abandon his woman. Even if Miss Li is still by my side as my maidservant, he will not let an innocent woman take risks. However, if you make a sound, the black-clothed men will know that there is someone else in the carriage. If they want to deal with the emperor, who is highly skilled in martial arts, it will be troublesome enough. Even if there is an endless stream of men in black, there will be an end. When all the men in black die, it will be over. But if they know that we are here, they will change their camp and catch us first. At that time, we will become hostages in the hands of the black-clothed men. At that time, not only will we be a burden to the emperor, but even the emperor will also become a fish on the black-clothed men's iron plate because of us. Or is this the result that you want to see, Miss Li? Li Yingying had never thought that her momentary worry for the emperor would be seen by Shen Yueji. After listening to her words, it would immediately change. Unfortunately, she couldn't refute Shen Yueji's words. She unexpectedly felt a lingering fear and annoyance. She regretted making a sound just now. She didn't dare to believe that if she made a sound in a moment of desperation, not only would it distract the emperor, but it would also make the black-clothed man realize that they were in the carriage. At that time, the emperor would be forced into a passive situation. Your Highness, she knelt in front of Shen Yueji with lingering fear. It's all my fault. It's all my fault for not being considerate enough. That's why. I almost harmed His Majesty and you. I'm guilty. Please punish me. Chapter 421. I'm afraid he has already rushed over to help His Majesty. The sound of fighting outside was still going on. Feng Jiuqing was injured, and some of the men in black wanted to step forward, but they were hesitant. Li Yingying's heart was completely focused on Feng Jiuqing, so she naturally didn't notice the strangeness of the men in black. Sitting in the carriage, Shen Yueji's eyes were tightly locked on the group of men in black. Seeing their hesitation, her lips curved into a smile. Just as Li Yingying was hesitating about what to do, she half opened the curtain and revealed her head, which was noticed by the men in black. Immediately, many of them abandoned the young emperor and waved the sharp swords in their hands to stab them. Li Yingying was so scared that her beautiful face turned pale, and the color had long changed. She should have screamed subconsciously, but because of Shen Yueji's words, she found that she couldn't make a sound even though her mouth was open. Seeing Li Yingying like this, Shen Yueji almost laughed out loud. At the critical moment, she saw that the men in black attacked decisively and fiercely, with the posture of taking Li Yingying's life. Frowning, she immediately pulled Li Yingying's arm and used her back to block the attack. Your Highness. Li Yingying was shocked and finally cried out uncontrollably. Jia. Not far away, Feng Jiuqing also noticed them when he heard this cry. The men in black attacked very quickly and didn't show any mercy at all. It was precisely because the person opposite him was Li Yingying that he planned to take her life with one sword, and then use Shen Yueji as a hostage. It was killing two birds with one stone. But he had never thought that Shen Yueji would actually hand over his back for a woman and bear this sword for her. For a moment, it was difficult to withdraw the sword. Until the long sword was almost about to pierce Shen Yueji's body, the men in black forgot to withdraw. A gust of wind swept past her eyes. Poochie, the sound of the long sword cutting into flesh. Shen Yueji was pulled into a warm embrace, and the man's muffled groan came from above her head. A faint smell of blood came from the man's body. Shen Yueji looked at the corner of the snow-white robe that was dyed red with blood, and tears immediately fell. Your Majesty. She was distressed and helpless, and even looked at the emperor in front of her with fear. Your Majesty, she was very careful, not daring to touch the wound on his arm. Her tears immediately fell. Emperor, how could you be so stupid? This minister's concubine's life is so lowly, how could you use your body to block it? If something happened to you, what would this minister's concubine do? She sobbed softly. Feng Jiuqing hugged her and stood at the edge of the cliff. They were cornered by the men in black. The scene from her previous life repeated once again. The man carefully protected her behind him. His tall and slender body was covered with countless wounds, but it did not show that he was in a sorry state. He stared intently at the men in black who were approaching them. Whatever you want, come at me. It has nothing to do with her. In this short period of time, a lot of things could happen, without exception. Shen Yueji knew that Feng Zhouqing's troops were lying in ambush not far from the Broken Intestine Cliff. When the time was right, they would come out to rescue them. This group of black-robed men were also Feng Zhouqing's men, and they knew what they would face in the end: death. Chapter 422. Sometimes, even Shen Yueji herself did not understand what benefits Feng Zhouqing had given them. However, some people were like this. Even if you could not give them anything, they would still inexplicably feel that you were good for them. They would die for you without any complaints, without any hesitation, and even sacrifice their lives for you. Shen Yueji was carefully protected behind the man. There was a faint smell of blood on his body. Wounds could be seen everywhere on his body. His snow-white robe had long been dyed red with blood, and his hair was also a little messy. "Your Majesty, I am not afraid. As a woman of the military family, even if I die standing, I will never kneel and beg for mercy. Jia, they are here for me. It has nothing to do with you. As long as I am here, I will not let you suffer any harm." H. Dog of our Emperor, did you ever think that this day would come when you killed more than 100 people of my Liu family? The leader of the men in black pointed his sword at Feng Zhouqing. Shen Yueji didn't know why, but even though she knew he was the one who planned everything, she still felt the man standing in front of her suddenly stiffen. After Feng Zhouqing ascended to the throne, he had killed countless prestigious officials in the court within 3 days. Even their wives and children were not spared. At that time, he told the outside world that these people were conspiring to rebel and secretly did things that were detrimental to Feng country and the people of the capital. Therefore, he ordered them to be beheaded to give an explanation to the people. She was not the only one who was paraded on the streets. These officials who had once sacrificed their lives for Feng country were also paraded on the streets. The people carried baskets of rotten eggs and wild vegetables and threw them at the officials who were locked in cages. They seemed to have forgotten that during their most difficult times, it was these officials who cared for them and used their salaries to help them. They also seemed to have forgotten that when they were short of food, those officials would rather starve themselves to take care of these people. This was also why Shen Yueji did not like to be associated with others. So what if you treated some people well? She was not you, and you were not him. You would never be people of the same world. Some people were good, and some people were evil. An arrow shot toward Feng Zhouqing. Feng Zhouqing did not know what was going on. Perhaps it was because of what the black-clad man had said earlier, but Feng Zhouqing did not react in time. He stood there motionlessly. Li Yingying, who was in the carriage, was already burning with anxiety. She couldn't care less as she shouted, "Your Majesty, be careful." Shen Yueji also came back to her senses at this time. She pushed Feng Zhouqing heavily. The unprepared man staggered from the push, and because of her habit, she gave all her strength to him. Under the man's shocked gaze, she was only an arm's length away from the sharp sword. However, she leaned backwards. "Yuji." This time, Feng Zhouqing's calm eyes finally showed some emotion. It was as if the scene before his eyes overlapped with the scene from a few years ago. There was also a person who, in order to push away that fatal arrow, allowed her delicate body to fall down the cliff. At that time, he had a budget, and he pulled her back in time. But this time, he threw himself on the cliff and grabbed Shen Yueji's hand. His arm was dripping with blood, and the hand on his hand was holding Shen Yueji tightly. Was it because of a scheme, or because of something else, or perhaps it was because of his relationship with her? Chapter 423. At this moment, his heart was in a mess. He didn't understand and was in a daze. He didn't know why his heart was in a mess. His arm hurt. More blood flowed out from his wound, but he didn't dare to let go. Looking at Shen Yueji's pale face, he gripped her hand tightly. "Hold on tight, don't let go. I'll pull you up. Your Majesty, as long as you're fine, this concubine can be at ease. You're the emperor of Feng country, nothing can happen to you. Perhaps this concubine. Don't talk nonsense." The man interrupted her with a hint of anger in his voice. "Nothing will happen to me, and nothing will happen to you." Blood dripped onto Shen Yueji's face. Apart from the bone-chilling wind blowing on her face, The man's blood also dripped onto her face. She looked up at him from below. At this moment, Shun Yueji felt an inexplicable sense of comfort. Perhaps, in her previous life, she shouldn't have been pulled up by him. Perhaps, she should have pried open his fingers and let herself fall. All of this had been personally planned by him, so why was he still able to show such deep emotions? He was so affectionate that Shun Yueji couldn't see any flaws. Tears flowed from the corner of her eyes. She saw that the man's injured arm clearly couldn't hold her firmly, but it was still strenuous. Your Majesty, let go. If you continue like this, your hand will be crippled. No, the man's smooth forehead was already covered in sweat. He grabbed Shun Yueji's wrist tightly. Use this concubine's strength to climb up. Don't let go. If this concubine uses your Majesty's strength to climb up, your Majesty's arm will really be crippled. Your Majesty, if this concubine dies, will you remember this concubine forever? Don't talk nonsense. The man's voice deepened. This concubine once asked about your Majesty and the former empress. She mentioned Jiyu Yuqin at this time. It was clear that the man's grip on her hand was about to loosen. But very quickly, he reacted and grabbed her hand again. If you have anything to say, just say it. Yueji, listen to me. You can't be stubborn at this time. This concubine orders you to climb up. Before the emperor became the emperor, he and the eldest miss of the Jiyu family went out for a parade. They also encountered a group of assassins in black. At that time, it was also a narrow escape. The emperor risked his life to protect the late empress. The man did not speak. His dark eyes were somewhat indecipherable. Shun Yueji smiled faintly. At that time, the former empress was saved by the emperor, so in the last few years, perhaps the emperor's memory will not be so deep. But if this time, this concubine was not saved by the emperor and fell off the cliff, will the emperor remember this concubine forever? Yuji. Realizing what she was about to do, Feng Zhouqing's heart thumped furiously in his chest as he felt an inexplicable sense of panic. However, Feng Zhouqing only tightened his grip on her. Come up first. I said that I wouldn't let anything happen to you, so you'll definitely be fine. I still have a group of secret guards hiding nearby. They will be here soon. If you are worried about me, hold on for a while longer. When they arrive, you and I will be fine. Your Majesty, have you ever really loved a person? Shun Yueji looked at him and suddenly smiled. In the past, this concubine liked the regent and liked to wander around behind him. Even if he looked at me, I would be happy for a few days and nights. But the regent didn't like this concubine. This concubine liked him for so long. In the end, this concubine finally got tired. This concubine wanted to enter the palace, but after meeting the emperor, this concubine found out what true love is. It was so undisguised that it shocked him so much that he took several steps back. It was an unfamiliar face, but it was familiar to him. The eldest son of the Liu family, Liu Qiancheng, he was a person who had been dead for a long time. Dog Emperor, you didn't expect this, did you? Liu Qiancheng looked up to the sky and laughed. The group of black-clothed men that you meticulously plotted against had already been killed by me. What a pity that I didn't take your life. But fortunately, he killed a woman. If I didn't guess wrongly, that woman was old General Shun's beloved daughter, Shun Yueji, right? Ha 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 ha. Chapter 425. He laughed until tears came out of his eyes. Looking at Feng Zhouqing's dark eyes, he didn't even bother to talk nonsense. He directly bit the poison in his mouth and died with blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. He had never thought of going back alive from this assassination. He knew that with his martial arts, he would not be Feng Zhouqing's opponent. Even if it was a meticulous plan, he still wouldn't be able to kill Feng Zhouqing. But for him, it was enough. All of this was enough. Feng Zhouqing staggered and lost his former gentleness and elegance. Qiu Yang saw that there was something wrong with him and quickly went forward to support him. Your Majesty, this subordinate was negligent this time. This subordinate will definitely order a thorough investigation to see who leaked the information. As for Imperial concubine Shun, send someone to look for her. Your Majesty, if she's alive, I want to see her corpse. Yes. Qiu Yang didn't dare to hesitate and led the men in black behind him to search. The broken intestines cliff was so high that it looked like it was shrouded in fog from top to bottom. There was fog everywhere. Even if a person with good qigong fell down, it would be difficult to escape death, let alone a woman like Shen Yueji. On the steep cliff, Shen Yueji looked at the man who was holding her in his arms. His chiseled facial features were cold, and his thin lips were pursed into a straight line. His black eyes were filled with endless hostility. If it weren't for the fact that he was tightening his grip on her hand, she would have thought that the man in front of her had become a walking corpse. Mo Wushang, why are you here? The two of them fell into the dark cave. The man hadn't put her down yet, but Shen Yueji had already jumped down from his arms and looked at him up and down. The man raised his eyebrows and looked at her coldly. If I'm not here, where do you think I should be? Have you been waiting here for a long time? The man didn't speak, but his cold aura was the best response to Shen Yueji's question. Not only had he been guarding here since a long time ago, deeply afraid that something would happen to her, he had even heard every word that she had said to Feng Zhouqing. Not a single word was missed. She knew he was worried about her. Shen Yueji wiped the blood off her face. I have my own plans, and I've been here before, so I know where to hide. I won't fall to my death. Even if you don't catch me, I'll be fine. At most, when she rolled inside, her wrist would be scratched a little, but this was nothing to Shen Yueji. But seeing the man's face, which was obviously not easy to get along with, if he could freeze just now, not to mention freezing now, he would even implicate others to be frozen together with him. Mo Wushang, what's wrong? I've already said that I know what I'm doing and that I won't hurt myself. In your heart, what exactly do you think I am? Why didn't you discuss such a dangerous matter with me? Or do you think that I don't have the qualifications to protect you? I didn't, you. If I didn't come here in person, would you let me know that Feng Zhouqing sent a message to the world saying that you fell off the cliff in order to save him? Mo Wushang, what's wrong with you? The next moment, the man gripped her wrist tightly, not allowing her to break free at all. The man pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. His cold face was devoid of warmth as he buried his face in her neck. Jia, I don't want to lose you again. Do you know that losing you once, I'm like a walking corpse? Chapter 426. Now that I've finally managed to keep you by my side, don't make me feel afraid, okay? I've said it before, Mo Wushang, I know what I'm doing. Before this, you also promised me that you wouldn't interfere in my affairs. I have my reasons for doing this. Moreover, you're so busy every day and have your own things to do. I don't want you to spend all your time on me. This will make me feel, how can anything compare to you, Jia? You know that I don't care about anything. I only care about you. I don't need to do anything. I just want to stay by your side, accompany you, take care of you, and not let anyone hurt you. But you keep rejecting me. In your heart, I've never existed, right? No matter what you do, you disdain to mention it to me. Even if you put your life on the line, I don't deserve to know, right? Men were born to be people of few words. In both her previous lives, the only change was that Mo Wushang was more thick-skinned and shameless when he spoke to her. But sometimes, his words were still pitifully few. But he wouldn't say so much to her all at once like today. Moreover, they were all words from his heart. That dull and low voice was full of helplessness and pain, just like a person who had been abandoned by her. Shen Yueji was just about to push him away and explain when she was caught off guard. She felt a warm sensation on her neck. She was shocked. His crying. She felt the man's tears falling on her neck. 1 drop, 2 drop, soaking her neck until it was boiling hot. For a moment, she was dumbfounded. She stood rooted to the ground, not knowing what to say or how to react. After a long time, the man hugged her without letting go. It was so long that Shen Yueji didn't know how long it had been. In short, she felt that a long time had passed. Mo Wushang, I really didn't mean to hide it from you. To me, it's really a small matter. I care about my life more than anyone else. How can I put myself in danger? I didn't tell you because I can do it on my own. I don't need to rely on men to do what I want to do. Secondly, I've wasted too much of your time these days. I know that you have a lot of things to deal with in private, so I really don't want to trouble you. I'm sorry for making you worry. I promise I won't do it again. Shin Yueji's heart is very uncomfortable, but she still grabs the man's sleeve. Next time, if there is such a thing, I will discuss it with you personally. Don't be angry, okay? She struggled to get up from the man's arms. However, the man hugged her tightly and didn't give her a chance to break free. That tight strength seemed to want to melt her into his bones. Mo Wushang, you've hugged me for so long. My body is covered in blood. I want to find a place with water to clean myself. I feel very uncomfortable like this. The man hugged her and did not have the slightest intention of letting go. Hey, don't you think the smell of blood on my body is disgusting? As long as it's from you, it won't smell bad. The man was silent for a long time before he spoke. Shin Yueji suddenly laughed. I'm not that stupid to make myself bleed. The blood on this body belongs to Feng Joqing. As long as you don't mind. Sure enough, before she could finish speaking, the man picked her up. Chapter 427. Shin Yueji was shocked. Mo Wushang, what are you doing? Put me down first. The road is slippery. I'll take you to find water. Obviously, the man was very familiar with the geography of the Broken Intestines cliff. He carried her down the steep slope, through a green forest, and Shin Yueji could hear the sound of water from afar. It was sloping down from a high place. It was a waterfall as high as 10 people. How do you know this place? You used to come here often? Putting her down from his arms, Mo Wushang did not speak, but just stared at the rapid flow of water from above. When Feng Joqing and her met with an accident at the Broken Intestines cliff, he was in the dark. If Feng Joqing did not protect him, he would protect her. He also saw with his own eyes the dependence and deep love in her eyes for the man. At the moment of crisis, it was he who held her hand and pulled her up from the steep cliff. Just now, the scene from a few years ago was repeated, but this time, it was she who personally opened the man's hand. Even when she said those words of deep love to him, Mo Wushang could no longer see the affectionate look she had when she faced Feng Joqing a few years ago. Her heart, as expected, no longer had him. It could not be said that there was no him, perhaps there was still him, but this deep love, unswerving love, was gradually being ground down, slowly disappearing. The smell of blood, and the blood on her face, a lot of it dried on her face. Shin Yueji was a little disgusted by this sticky smell and touch. Walking to the river, she first washed the serum on her face, and the hem of her clean dress was also stained with blood. She took off her coat, as if she was going to the river to wash when the man did not exist. The man stood 3 steps away from her. Perhaps because some of the blood had soaked through her clothes and touched her skin, Shin Yueji began to hesitate before she made the final move. She looked back at the man 3 steps away from her. Mo Wushang, I want to take a bath, stay away from me, don't peek. The man slightly raised his eyebrows, his handsome face expressionless, but he stood there with his own thoughts, not moving. Mo Wushang. Shin Yueji gritted her teeth and shouted, did you hear what I said? I want to take a bath, stay away from me, don't peek. There are wild beasts passing by at the foot of the mountain. I will guard you here, or else you will not be safe. Have you ever seen a beast that isn't afraid of water? Besides, if she went into the water, the beasts wouldn't be able to swim. Even if there were beasts, they wouldn't be able to do anything to her. The man paused and frowned. There are snakes in the water and many unknown poisonous things. Shin Yueji, she held a handful of water and waved it towards the man. Only a few drops of water splashed on his handsome face. The man didn't dodge. He stood where he was. In order to make it easier for her to splash him with water later, he took 2 steps forward. Shin Yueji lost her temper because of his subconscious shameless action. Forget it. She muttered to herself. It wasn't like she hadn't seen it before. She took off her inner clothes. When she was only left with a small doo-doo, she hesitated. The man behind her was even more terrifying and savage than a beast in her heart. She put the clean clothes on the shore and waded into the water. Mo Wushang looked at the clothes she had neatly piled on the shore. The clothes were wet in many places, and he remembered that she would have to wear clothes after taking a bath. She would catch a cold wearing these wet clothes. Chapter 428. His dark eyes dimmed a little. He stepped forward, picked up the clothes she had taken off on the shore, and then turned to go elsewhere. Shin Yueji didn't dare to soak in the water for too long. Perhaps it was because of Mo Wushang's words that there was something scary in the water. She took a quick bath and swam back to the shore until the sticky smell of blood on her body dissipated. "What are you doing?" She looked at the clothes that the man handed to her. Shin Yueji took it. There was still heat on it. For a moment, she couldn't tell what she was feeling. She just said, "Did you dry my clothes? The clothes are damp. You will catch a cold if you wear them." The man gave a brief explanation. Seeing Shin Yueji come out of the water, he consciously turned around and let her put on her clothes first. "Mo Wushang, why are you here? Is it because you are worried about me?" After she put on her clothes, Mo Wushang turned to look at her. There was a rare seriousness and gentlemanly look on his handsome face. But the way he looked at her was clearly saying, "Otherwise? Didn't Hong Fui come to you for something? I can't go back now. I can only go back after Feng Joqing sends someone to find me. Maybe I will have to stay here for a few days. You can go back first. Don't worry about me." Before she finished speaking, the man hugged her waist again. He didn't say anything, but it was better than talking. Shin Yueji could feel that as long as she was here, the man would not leave. She felt warm and sad in her heart. Such a good man, why did she put all her heart on Feng Joqing and not look at him more? If she had fallen in love with Mo Wushang, would nothing have happened? Maybe she and Mo Wushang now. She clutched the man's collar tightly. "Mo Wushang, can you not be so good to me?" It was so good that she didn't know how to refuse his kindness. She could only accept it with a clear conscience. She said that she was willing to accept him, but she didn't know how long she could hold on and what the consequences would be. The man looked down at her, his black eyes as bright as stars. His tight lips eased a little because of the anger just now. "You only realized that I am so good to you now?" Shin Yueji subconsciously grabbed his collar. "I realized it a long time ago. Why are you so nice to me? What if I can't give you what you want? Jia knows what I want." Looking at his handsome face, Shin Yueji choked for a moment, her face inexplicably hot. "In case I can't give it to you." Carrying her into the cave, Mo Wushang took off his outer robe and placed it on a hard rock before placing her on it. As Shin Yueji sat on it, the man's tall body also pressed down. Shin Yueji was startled and subconsciously placed her hands on his chest. "Mo Wushang, don't mess around," her lips were blocked. Unlike the previous few kisses, the man's kiss this time was gentle with a hint of roughness. It was as if a storm had suddenly started after the calm of the storm. Shin Yueji's hands were restrained by the man and she could not move. She kept her mouth shut and did not want the man to come in. Who knew that he would directly touch her chest with one hand? Seeing that she still didn't let go, his other large hand wandered around her body wantonly, vaguely showing signs of moving downwards. "Mo Wushang, don't." The tip of the man's tongue slipped in as he wished and entangled with her. After the kiss, it felt like an eternity. Shin Yueji did not know how much time had passed. Chapter 429. She licked her lips, which were numb from his kiss, and complained, "Haven't I coaxed you? Why are you angry again? I just apologized to you." The man snorted, "Who accepted your apology?" Listening to his tough tone, Shin Yueji also became angry. "This is my own business. If you can't stand it, then don't look. Who asked you to intervene? I'm not a fool. Even if you didn't come, I wouldn't let myself get hurt." When she met the man's dark eyes, Shin Yueji swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She sat on the stone and turned her back to him. She didn't know how long it took, until her waist was held in the man's arms. Her nose was full of the man's scent. She heard the man's helpless sigh from above her head. Shin Yueji's nose was sour, and she was stuffy in his arms. "Don't be angry, okay? You usually indulge me. You will make me feel that you don't care about me. The man rubbed her head. In your heart, is my love for you so unbearable? Who asked you to be angry with me? I heard that most men are narrow-minded when they are angry with women. Now you know I'm narrow-minded. Shin Yueji, if you want to be angry, then be angry. I won't coax you anymore. Mo Wushang, since you are so difficult to please, why are you still here? Go back to your regent's mansion immediately. I don't need you to accompany me. Shin Yueji finally calmed down. Because of the man's words and the obvious sharp tone, she pushed him away discontentedly and got up from the man's arms. When she saw that the man really didn't say a word this time, nor did he come forward to ask her to stay, but turned around and left the cave. The strong and tall figure slowly disappeared from her sight. Shin Yueji's eyes turned red in an instant. There were countless waves rolling in her heart, which was very unpleasant. Under her body, the man considerately took off the robe for her to prevent her from catching a cold. She could still smell the man's unique scent when she touched it. She knew that the man was angry for her own good. He blamed her for not discussing with him in advance and taking such a big risk. If anything happened, she might not even be able to save her own life. Shin Yueji knew everything, but she was still stubborn, especially when she saw the man was angry but still held back. In her heart, she was happy that the man cared so much about her. Perhaps it was because she was used to hearing the gentle and lingering tone of the man when he spoke to her, she could not accept him suddenly being a little more firm. She wiped the corners of her eyes and found that there were really tears flowing out. She picked up the clothes on the rock and was about to chase after them, but when she ran out of the cave, she hesitated. She uncontrollably withdrew her legs and feet in time. She sat back down in the distance, feeling lost. She held the man's clothes in her arms. Sitting on the hard and damp stone was not comfortable at all. She was wondering if she had really gone too far this time, but she did all this just to gain Feng Zhouqing's trust. Even if his trust was zero, there had never been a woman who would throw away her life for him at such a critical moment. In the past, he was the one who protected her, but now, it was another woman who protected him. She was taking a step on her own path of revenge. In the future, such things would happen again, whether there was Mo Wushang or not. Chapter 430. She and he were not on the same line. His identity and background were suspicious. Just like him, he had promised himself that he would not lie to her, but he still hid his identity. Shin Yueji lay on the stone, unable to feel the cold and damp touch. Her mind was full of Mo Wushang's resolute back view. When she woke up again, what came into view was a man dressed in black, and his muscular chest was slightly moving. Other than the man's unique scent, Shin Yueji also smelled the fragrance of meat. She thought she was dreaming. Didn't the man leave? Then who was the man holding her in his arms? She stared at the man in confusion, as if trying to tell if she was dreaming or if the man did not leave. She pinched the man's face. Mo Wushang, is it really you? The man wrapped her hand in his palm and kissed the back of her hand. I'm sorry, it was my fault just now. I won't lose my temper with you in the future. Are you hungry? I just went to roast some rabbit meat for you. So, Mo Wushang did not leave at all. He just felt hungry and went to hunt some rabbits for her. Shin Yueji's nose turned sour and she threw herself into the man's arms. I thought you didn't want me anymore. The words were sad and powerless. For a moment, Shin Yueji's heart was flustered. Mo Wushang was too good to her. He indulged and tolerated her. It was hard for her to imagine what would happen if, because of today, she and Mo Wushang no longer had any entanglements. Would she still be able to calmly do what she wanted to do? Would she still think of him? Many years in the future, would she remember that there was such a man who had once treated her so well? Don't cry. Mo Wushang gently wiped the tears on her face. His eyes fell on her little mouth that was sobbing because of the grievance. Just now, she said that she was afraid that he would not want her anymore. He carefully held her in his arms. You are already a woman in my bones. How can I bear to not want you? He never thought that these words would come out of her mouth. Even if she said no, it would be him. He was afraid that she would say no. He was afraid that she would dislike him one day. But he did not expect. She was actually worried that he might not want her anymore. Jia, don't cry. It's all my fault. I was just afraid that you would be hungry, so I went to find you something to eat. When I came in, I saw that you were asleep, so I went to roast the rabbit. I'll bring it to you when you wake up. He took the rabbit meat from the rack and said, I just roasted it and it's still warm. Do you want me to feed you? Then why didn't you say anything just now? Why did you turn around and leave? Shin Yueji sobbed. Just like when she was still Jiu Yuqin, she left so decisively without any explanation. I'm just angry that you risked your life. Mo Wushang looked at her solemnly. I don't want to go through such a dangerous thing a second time. He was afraid. The woman in front of him was someone he would love for the rest of his life. How could he bear to lose his temper at her? He was just angry at himself. Even if he were to lose his temper, it would only be directed at him. It had nothing to do with her. Even going out was to vent his frustrations. He didn't want to scare her with his appearance. Because he had lost once, Mo Wushang didn't want to go through it a second time. His whole heart was in his throat. He could lose the world, but he couldn't lose her. Chapter 431. Shin Yueji tore a large piece of barbecued meat and handed it to the man's mouth. You eat first. She met the man's puzzled eyes. Shin Yueji leaned over and kissed the man's smooth chin. You've been busy and haven't eaten anything. Fill your stomach first. I can't finish it all anyway. The man looked at her delicate smile and felt wronged after crying. He opened his mouth and let her put a piece of rabbit meat into his mouth with her small black hand. Mo Wushang, I just remembered that you smashed everything in my Jilan courtyard the day before yesterday. Not a single thing is intact. I haven't even settled the score with you, yet you still dare to get angry at me. She could clearly see the man's dark eyes flicker. Mo Wushang kissed her little mouth and asked, Is the rabbit delicious? Shin Yueji nodded cooperatively. Yes. Is one enough? I'll go and catch another one for you. Sensing that he was changing the topic, Shin Yueji sneered and grabbed his collar to stop him from moving. Where do you want to go? Come back and tell me clearly. I'm hurt. Shin Yueji didn't understand why he suddenly said that. Her face quickly showed a surprised expression. She quickly pulled his clothes and checked his injuries. Where are you hurt? Take off your clothes and let me see. Shangguan, you beat me. Shangguan, you beat you. Shin Yueji narrowed her eyes and tried to pull off his clothes. Where? Let me see. Besides, you're so good at martial arts. I know Shangguan you knows martial arts, but how could he be your opponent? Mo Wushang, tell me the truth. What's going on between you two? You don't care about me anyway. Mo Wushang looked indifferent. It seemed that he was going to pull up his clothes again. It doesn't matter. As long as I love you, it doesn't matter if you don't care about me. Shin Yueji, looking at him twitching, Shin Yueji couldn't help but pull down his big hand. Mo Wushang, are you out of your mind again? Let me ask you, when did you two fight? No, he didn't like me and beat me. Shin Yueji, after a long time, he finally squeezed out a few words from his mouth. Why do I not like you? Perhaps it's because Jia dotes on me? The man looked at her. Shin Yueji was startled. Even the hand that was tearing his clothes was startled. However, she still did not slow down. Instead, she pulled his clothes. The loose robe was on his body. Right now, he was only wearing a tight suit. Therefore, when Shin Yueji tore it off, it was abnormally easy. She then looked at his smooth chest and saw a bright purple mark. She touched it with her little hand. Is this the place? The man looked a bit aggrieved and pressed her hand. Well, it hurts. Jia, rub it. Don't you know how to dodge when he hits you? Don't tell me you can't beat him. Shin Yueji looked at the wound on his chest. It was a white expanse, and this large patch of purple was as dazzling as it could be. It would be a lie to say that she was not angry in her heart. Not only was she angry, but she also felt an inexplicable heartache. Although Shangguan Yu is a gentleman, I have long seen through him. If he really wants to achieve a certain goal, he will do anything. He will do anything. And you? Chapter 432. She glared at the man in front of her. When have you ever let yourself be taken advantage of? Tell me, what are you up to this time? No other ideas? Jia doesn't feel sorry for me. Looking at his aggrieved expression, Shen Yueji's heart softened. She quickly touched his face. Okay, I'm afraid of you. Tell me, does it still hurt? Did you see a doctor and apply medicine? The man shook his head. Shen Yueji glared at him. Then what do you want? Jia, kiss me. Shen Yueji's face immediately heated up when she realized that he was asking her to kiss him there. Yet, this man looked so serious and said such serious words. Looking at his serious face, it was as if she was the one who thought wrong and the man was just saying it casually. After helping him put on his clothes, Shen Yueji began to eat the roasted rabbit meat. Forget it, I don't feel sorry for you anyway. If you want to die, go ahead. If you die, I will remarry. Mo Wushang was speechless. Looking at the little woman he missed sitting in front of him and eating with relish, the man's dark eyes were deep and dark. She really didn't care about him? In this wilderness, Shen Yueji suddenly realized that although the man was not good at cooking, he was quite good at roasting things. She did not know what he had sprinkled on the rabbit meat, but it did not taste sweet. Instead, the taste was moderate and exceptionally delicious. Mo Wushang, are you busy now? The man replied angrily. Not busy. Not busy. Since you're not busy, then go catch another rabbit for me to roast. You're not going. If you don't want to go, then forget it. After eating, I will go catch one myself. Anyway, there are many wild beasts in this wilderness. If you are not worried that I will. Before she could finish, she saw the man suddenly stand up, obviously to catch a rabbit. As he stood up, Shen Yueji quickly stood up and ran in front of him, blocking his way. Mo Wushang stood where he was and stared at her for a while. He frowned in confusion. Go and catch it now. Clean it and come back to roast it. It just so happens that you are almost done eating. Shen Yueji didn't say anything. Instead, she raised her greasy little hand and suddenly wrapped it around the man's neck. Her little mouth covered in rabbit grease sealed the man's thin lips. Feeling the man's tall and sturdy body, she was startled. Shen Yueji stopped and then left the man's lips. Is it delicious? For some strange reason, the man nodded stiffly. Shen Yueji's eyes carried a smile. She moved closer and bit the man's thin lips again. Does the wound on your chest still hurt? The man shook his head. Then, Shen Yueji kissed him again. Do you still think I have no conscience? Yes. This time, the man reacted quickly. Shen Yueji stuffed a mouthful of rabbit meat into his mouth and said, Good boy, let's go catch some rabbits. The man's handsome face softened and he calmed down. His beautiful lips curved slightly. Millimeter, I'll be back soon. Wait for me here obediently and don't run around. Looking at the man's back as he left, Shen Yueji could not help but smile. This man, really, sometimes when he lost his temper and let his temper run wild, she actually felt that he was damned cute. Moreover, Shen Yueji also found that no matter how angry this man was because of her, as long as he was kissed and coaxed by her, he would immediately recover. She sat on a wide rock and ate the rabbit meat alone. The cave was dark, but because there was light coming in from the outside, the inside of the cave seemed especially bright. Chapter 433. Shen Yueji realized that she didn't feel cold at all. She didn't know if it was because of the barbecued meat, but she felt warm in her heart and body. Shen Yueji didn't know if it was because of her quarrel with the man, but she didn't feel cold at all. Instead, she felt warm in her heart and body. Your Majesty, there is a secret report from the palace. There is an urgent matter that requires you to return to the palace as soon as possible. Above the Broken Heart Cliff, Feng Jiuqing's bloody clothes had been cleaned and even the wounds on his body had been bandaged. It had been nearly 4 hours since Shen Yueji fell off the cliff. The secret guards he sent down to search for her were still nowhere to be found. Qiu Yang saw him like this and remembered the secret report from the palace. He couldn't help but remind him, "Your Majesty, Imperial concubine Shen is a good person, she will be fine. Dozens of well-trained secret guards with high martial arts skills have gone down from here to search for her, but now there is no trace of her. Yueji is just a woman." No one knew better than him how high the Broken Heart Cliff was. He originally had his own plan, but he didn't expect that Shen Yueji didn't act according to his original plan. He thought that all women in this world were afraid of death. They liked glory and wealth and relied on their husbands. Even Jiyu Yuqin, who used to be the center of everything, was nothing more than this. So he felt that she was boring. Even if she liked him to the point that she would give everything for him. But he didn't love her. Perhaps he still cared about her a little. He cared about how much she cared about him and how much she liked him. He cared about how obedient she was. Perhaps, in his heart, she was still better than those women. After all, she had been with him since he had nothing. But he also didn't expect that a daughter born in a family of generals, who had lived a luxurious life since she was young, never suffered any hardships or grievances, would be willing to die to protect him. Even Jiyu Yuqin couldn't do it. A few years ago, he held Jiyu Yuqin's hand. She was also at the bottom of the Broken Heart Cliff, looking at his body full of injuries. She also cried and begged him to let go. But at that moment, how could he really let go? Even though his body was in pain, even though countless wounds had opened up, he did not let go of her hand. It was just that his plan was to pull her up from the bottom. He wanted her to devote all of her loyalty to him. But Shen Yueji, however, she pried open her fingers and pried open his fingers one by one. Then, she fell off the cliff. Feng Zhouqing didn't know what was going on, but he felt like he was possessed by a demon. It was like he was in a dream. He was so deep in a dream that he couldn't tell if the scene before him was something that had happened a few years ago, or if it was something that was happening right now. Emperor? Qiu Yang looked at him worriedly. Of course, he also knew that if Shen Yueji fell off this high cliff, she would be smashed to pieces. But when he saw Feng Zhouqing's appearance, he was still a little shocked. The emperor had always been the center of the court affairs. All these years, he had always kept it in his heart. Even the late empress didn't let the emperor put aside the government affairs and put her in charge. But now, he had mentioned the secret report from the palace twice in front of the emperor, but he didn't get any response from the man. It seemed that he didn't hear it, but he also seemed to hear it. But his heart was at the bottom of the cliff, and his heart had already been hooked by the person below. Chapter 434. Your Majesty. Qiu Yang was worried, so he called out again. Feng Zhouqing seemed to come back to his senses. His eyes were scarlet and bloodshot. Your Majesty, Imperial concubine will be fine. She is so kind and I believe that God will take care of her. Li Yingying got out of the carriage. She still had a lingering fear after what had happened just now. Her face was pale. Naturally, she had seen the scene where Shen Yueji fell off the cliff to protect her man. She was shocked. She had suspected that she had no feelings for the emperor, but now she was willing to die for him. Since she cared about him so much, why did she bring her into the palace to seduce the emperor? Feng Zhouqing saw her familiar face. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Suddenly, he stepped forward and took Li Yingying into his arms. Hugging her tightly, he hugged her tightly. He had always been fearless in the face of danger, but today he lost his composure. Qin, is that you? You're back. Your Majesty. Li Yingying couldn't breathe because of him. She started to struggle in his arms. Your Majesty, I'm Yingying. You've mistaken me for someone else. Your Majesty. When she saw Qiu Yang behind him through the man's body, the latter covered his mouth and coughed softly. He said respectfully, Your Highness, there is an important matter in the palace that requires the emperor to return to the palace to deal with in time. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace as soon as possible. Li Yingying knew that Qiu Yang's words were for her, but she was shocked. She didn't know how to answer him. After all, she wasn't the real empress. Moreover, the emperor was conscious. He just thought she was the former empress at this moment. If she rashly, but when she met Qiu Yang's pleading eyes, amid her. Benefactor Qiu is right. Please help me persuade the emperor to return to the palace. Guard Qiu is guarding here. If Miss Shun is found, Guard Qiu will inform the emperor as soon as possible. Kong Yin got out of the carriage. He had seen so much excitement, but he didn't intervene. He had been watching the show with folded arms. Yesterday, he had already told Shen Yueji everything. He believed that Shen Yueji's choice was all within her plans, but he had never imagined that she would put on such a show. She was returning everything that Feng Zhouqing had given her. He couldn't help but rejoice that he had chosen to rely on this woman. Sure enough, after 9 years of marriage, in terms of understanding, he really couldn't compare to Shen Yueji. Seeing that even the emperor's most valued great master Kong Yin was begging her, and seeing the young emperor's pitiful appearance, Li Yingying couldn't bear to see him like this. She gathered her courage and reached out to caress the man's back. Your Majesty, let's return to the palace first. Nothing will happen to the imperial consort. Bodyguard Qiu will be here to guard her for you. General's residence. From the moment the emperor's carriage was attacked on the Broken Heart Cliff to the moment Shen Yueji fell off the cliff, the people in the general's mansion immediately received the news. However, at this moment, the general's residence was as stable as Mount Tai. No one was anxious. I never thought that the Prince Regent would go in person. General, Madam, what do you think? Did the son-in-law do well this time? Double Happiness dutifully poured tea for the two of them. Shunhe took a sip calmly and crossed his legs. Not bad, not bad. I didn't choose the wrong son-in-law. Sure enough, the Prince Regent understands me the most. Chapter 435. Madam, Jia and the Prince Regent are down there, a man and a woman alone. What if? You're not serious. What are you talking about? Shen Qiu, who was drinking tea, listened to his words and almost threw it at him. If not for our people guarding below, if they knew that Jia fell off the cliff, Ari, you say, what is this girl doing? Why didn't she suddenly tell us? We almost thought that the old-haired person is going to die before the black-haired person. My daughter is really smart. She made such a scene and saved the emperor. In this way, won't the emperor like her even more? Oh, by the way, Double Happiness, where did your young master go? Oh, young master. Double Happiness poured another cup of tea for Madame Shen and said, he knew that something happened to Miss. He fell off the cliff and went to the street to cry. If General's wife thinks it's embarrassing, I can pull young master back, but I may not be able to do it alone. General and Madam must send more people to help me. Shun Yu Kai pulled a few of his old friends and cried on the street. The common people in the capital didn't know what had happened, but after he did this, they all knew that the eldest daughter of the Shun family had fallen off the cliff to save the emperor, and her life was uncertain. Shun Yueji's feat was praised by the people in the capital. They didn't expect the eldest daughter of the Shun family to be so heroic. She was not weaker than a man. She was indeed the daughter of the Shun family. Shun Yu Kai cried his heart out on the street. Occasionally, a few pedestrians would come over to comfort him. As a result, Shun Yu Kai wiped his tears and snot on his body. They quickly walked away with a black face and didn't even want to talk to him. After crying for a long time, Shun Yu Kai saw the corner of a white robe appear in front of him. Looking up from the corner of the robe, he saw Shangguan Yu's handsome face covered in scarlet. He used to be gentle and refined, but now he was like a wolf and a wild beast. He looked very different from his usual amiable and approachable self. If he used to be a docile cat, now he looked like a crazy tiger. When Shun Yu Kai saw him, he only glanced at him before withdrawing his gaze and continuing to sit on the ground, wailing loudly. After crying for a while, he found that Shangguan Yu was still staring at him. He stopped crying and looked up at him. Young Master Shangguan, are you going to sit here and cry with me? Her voice was sobbing as if she had suffered a great grievance. Shangguan Yu's face did not change much. It was still the same face as before, cold as frost, so stiff that it seemed as if only a layer of dry skin was left. If not for his scarlet eyes, Shin Yu-kai would have thought that the man in front of her was just an empty shell that could not move, a body without a soul. Shangwon Yu's thin lips moved slightly, and it took him a long time to say something. He squatted in front of Shin Yu-kai and held his shoulders with his big palms. Tell me, she's not real. Jia's not real. His strength made Shin Yuechi's face change color. If he hadn't cried for a long time and didn't have any strength, he would have slapped him back. He looked terrible. I've cried like this. How can it be fake? My sister is a first-class imperial concubine in the Foam country. Who would dare to make fun of her? I just pity my sister. Chapter 436. 2 lines of tears slid down Shin Yuechi's cheeks. She's gone at such a young age. As her brother, I'm going to die before him. Father and mother will only have me as their only son. Sob sob sob. No, it's impossible, it's impossible. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. How could something happen to Jia? It can't be. Jia won't die. She won't die. How is it possible? Shangwon Yu murmured to himself as he staggered and fell backward. Shin Yu-kai watched as his body fell back powerlessly. His face was deathly pale and bloodless. He sat on the ground and cried. Because he had fallen on the ground, his palms were bleeding from being cut by the stones. His snow-white robe was also stained with dust, causing his body to become a lot dirtier. But he didn't seem to feel it. He struggled to get up from the ground and walked forward with difficulty. Shin Yu-kai didn't know where he was going. He called him a few times, but he didn't respond. He was like an emotionless puppet with no soul and only a body before. Now, he gave Shin Yu-kai the illusion that very soon, he wouldn't even have this physical body anymore. He had seen Shangwon Yu's love for Ji-er for so many years. He had always been free to let it go. Because Ji-er didn't like him, he never paid attention to Shangwon Yu. He didn't observe Shangwon Yu carefully. He only knew that there was such a person who had been pestering Ji-er. This was the first time that Shin Yu-kai looked at him seriously. After all, he was the eldest son of the Shangwon family and the only son of the family. He couldn't die like this. It was true that Ji-er faked her death. What if he really killed Shangwon Yu? Thinking of this, Shin Yu-kai cried enough. He quickly got up from the ground and chased after Shangwon Yu. Shangwon Yu stumbled and swayed as he walked aimlessly. There seemed to be a road of no return in front of him, and there seemed to be nails under his feet. He couldn't even walk steadily. Shin Yu-kai knew that he couldn't respond to him. In order to not attract too much attention, he didn't call out to him either. He just followed behind him, following him all the way to the wilderness, through the forest, to a deserted place with few people, and then through the mountains and rivers, to the Broken Heart Cliff. He only relied on his footsteps to run all the way. He didn't feel tired at all. It felt like he was a puppet being controlled by someone else. He was muttering Jia's name. As he passed through the forest, a wild beast rushed up to bite him. He didn't resist, letting the beast bite his arm. He didn't seem to feel any pain. For a moment, Shin Yu-kai thought that he was going to be eaten by the beast. His bloody arms were all bitten by wild beasts. Later, Shin Yu-kai found out that Shangwon Yu really wanted to be eaten by wild beasts. He wanted to die. It was as if the thing he had been chasing for his whole life had suddenly disappeared and would never appear in this world again. He had lost all hope of living, so, Shin Yu-kai was horrified. He didn't expect that this skinny man would have such deep feelings for his little sister. It was as if he was possessed. If it wasn't for Mo Wushang, he really couldn't help but try to matchmake Mo Wushang and his little sister. In the future, his little sister would marry such a man. She would be the head of the family, and this man would also do his best to pamper and protect her. He would never let her suffer any grievances. What a shame. Chapter 437. He saved him from the claws of the beast. It was as if he knew that he was following him. He did not turn around to look at him, nor did he speak to him. He continued to murmur the same words that he had said along the way. He continued to walk forward. When he passed by a patch of water, he did not know how deep the water was and walked straight. As a result, he almost drowned. He was so frightened that he quickly jumped into the water and fished him out. He pressed on his chest to let him breathe. He was already a soulless body. This time, he couldn't move. It was even scarier. Fortunately, he saved him in time. The man was fine. When he woke up, he pushed Shangguan Yu away and continued to stumble forward. Shen Yu Kai had no choice but to follow Shangguan Yu to the end. He had walked for a long time with Shangguan Yu, and there was no path on the cliff. When Shen Yu Kai saw Shangguan Yu jump down, he was shocked and hurriedly used his lightness skill to catch him. In short, Shen Yu Kai felt like he was going to be crippled. He even regretted following him. Why did he follow him? Why didn't he just let him die? Damn it, was this man so fragile? He was so fragile that he was about to die. He couldn't live without his woman, could he? Although he couldn't live without his sister, she was his sister. They were different. Finally, he reached the place he wanted to go, the Broken Heart Cliff. His white robes were no longer clean. They were covered in dust and dirt. Even his handsome face had many scratches and scratches. His arm was covered in blood. It was hard to tell if his arm was still intact or broken. He stood at the top of the Broken Heart Cliff, looking down at the smoke-shrouded cliff. Why did you save me? Shen Yu Kai was speechless. My father and your father are old friends. If something happens to you, how are we going to explain to your father? You're the only son your father has. Speaking of this, Shen Yu Kai couldn't help but sigh. Shangguan Yu, can we not be so weak? They were all men, and men were supposed to achieve great things. Was there a need to spend all this effort on romance? If my sister dies, you won't be able to live, right? Tell me, aren't you ashamed? Ashamed? Shangguan Yu smiled weakly and said, from the moment I took the trouble to follow Ji-er, I no longer know what face is. He turned around and saw Shen Yu Kai looking at him with disdain. He smiled. Young Master Shen, you must not know what it feels like to be in love. That feeling, when facing the person you love, you can only hope that everything is good for her. If you love her, you can become a demon for her, you can go crazy for her. In the past, I tirelessly followed behind her. Even though I knew that she didn't like me, hated me, or even loathed me, I was still diligent and happy. As long as I could see her every day, it was a kind of satisfaction to me. Do you know, when I saw her holding a whip in disgust and waving it up and down at me, as if he had thought of something funny, he suddenly laughed. His laughter was filled with joy and aftertaste, as if he was completely immersed in it. The way she was angry, the way she bared her fangs and brandished her claws, I found it strangely charming and moving. Everything in this world is beautiful. If I were to describe it, I'm afraid that nothing in this world could compare to 1,000th of her beauty. I can live and die for her. Chapter 438. When the whip in her hand hit me mercilessly, I felt the pain of the whip. That kind of pain was like a pain that penetrated deep into my bones. It was so painful that it was hot and scalding. However, I turned this pain into love and joy. As long as I remembered that she was the one who hit me with the whip, I could not feel the pain anymore. All I could think about was her. When she hit me, I was not angry at all. I was not angry at all. Instead, I thought that she was very cute when she was angry. She has always been so obvious when it comes to whether she likes or dislikes someone. When she likes someone, she can dedicate all of her passion and joy to them. But when she hates someone, just like how she treats me, she can be merciless and completely reject me. She thought that as long as she was fiercer and more ruthless to me and hit me harder with her whips, I would one day back off after losing face and suffering in her hands. But she was wrong. Not only would I not back off, when her whips hit me harder and harder, it was like helplessness in my heart that I couldn't get what I wanted. It was like a branding iron that left a deep, heavy mark on my body. It was so deep, so heavy that it reached into my bones. Brother Shen, after thinking about it, his voice suddenly became hoarse and deep, mixed with deep pain. In order to get her, I used all kinds of means. Perhaps some of the means were unworthy of my identity and made it difficult for me to raise my head in capital city. However, I did not regret it. Even if I almost hurt her, I was willing to use the rest of my life to make up for it. But now, after knowing that she was no longer in this world, I realized that I was wrong. How wrong I was. It turns out that loving someone is to let her live a good life, not to blindly get her. In order to get her, I did so many things to hurt her. I thought that in this world, only I could give her happiness, and I destroyed all the fantasies she liked. Before this, I didn't understand. I didn't understand why I treated her so well, and why she still hated me so much. I could tolerate everything about her, whether it was her stubbornness or her willfulness. Later on, when I saw her with Mo Wuxiang, I was filled with hatred. I don't understand, I've been so good to her, why does she hate me so much? Why does she want to reject me? She keeps saying that she's the emperor's woman and doesn't want to implicate me and my Shangguan clan, but why can she be with Mo Wuxiang? That man wanted to kill her in the past. She's actually willing to stay by his side and accompany him without any regrets. At that moment, I could not deny the anger and jealousy in my heart. Why can Mo Wuxiang do it, but why can't I? I just want to be by her side, and when she needs me, she can see me whenever she turns her head, but she's stingy now, so she wants to take back even this little bit. Shen Yukai, tell me, my heart isn't made of iron. I've sacrificed for so long, so many years, and suffered so much coldness and discrimination. I have no regrets, but when another man is accepted by her, I also feel pain, jealousy, and jealousy. Or is it that my identity is not comparable to Mo Wuxiang's, and I can't compare to the current emperor's? But no one can compare to my heart. I'm wholeheartedly devoted to her, and my feelings for her will never change. I will only have her as my wife, and I will treat her well for the rest of my life. But why? His good-looking lips curled into a smile as he glanced at Shen Yuechi's face, which was slightly out of control due to shock. Brother Yukai, is there any meaning in lying to me just to keep me alive? You should know that for so many years, I've lived for Ji Er. Ji Er is dead, and I've long been living in this world like a walking corpse. It's better to let me go down to accompany her. It's so dark underground, and she must be scared to be alone. Only I can accompany her. Fuck. Chapter 440. Shen Yukai found that his head was really swollen now. He found that this guy was a bit stupid. No wonder his sister didn't like him. If he was so stupid, it would be strange if she liked him. He hesitated on the spot. He had just said that Yu Ji was not dead in a moment of desperation. He was afraid that he would not be able to control himself and tell Shangguan Yu everything later. After all, Jia had told him that only the people of the general's mansion could know, and no one else could know. But if he didn't say it, the cold wind blew on his face, making him feel cold. While he was hesitating, the white blood-red robe suddenly jumped. Shen Yukai was shocked and cursed out loud. Then, he saw the snow-white figure falling straight down. He was shocked and rushed down without thinking, jumping down the cliff with him. When he finally grabbed the corner of Shangguan Yu's clothes, Shangguan Yu felt someone pulling him and opened his eyes. He almost couldn't believe that Shen Yukai also jumped down with him. Brother Yukai, he pursed his lips. At this moment, he didn't know what to say. His heart was in a mess. Ji was dead, he had no hope of living, but he was the only one who wanted to die. He didn't want to drag Shen Yukai down with him. Uncle Shen and Auntie Shen had just lost their beloved daughter. It was hard for them to accept seeing their daughter die before them. If Shen Yukai were to leave them now, he didn't know if their bodies would be able to take it. He grabbed Shen Yuechi's wrist, and wanted to send him up with the last bit of internal force. The wind was too strong at the bottom of the cliff, especially when they were falling straight down. It was too fast for Shen Yukai to bear. His face was almost distorted by the wind. He threw himself into Shangguan Yu's arms and cried bitterly. Wait for me to finish talking. Jump, I don't want to die. You bastard, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Don't think about reincarnating. I'll pester you to death. Brother Yu Kai. Shangguan Yu looked at him with mixed feelings as he threw himself into his arms, his hands holding his waist tightly, and he had no strength left to send him up. In the past, only women would throw themselves at men. In the past, there were many women who did the same to him, but because he only had Jia in his heart, he would usually reject them completely. Of course, there were a few women who didn't stop them. They were from aristocratic families and took advantage of the moment when he was unprepared. But for a man, this was definitely the first time Shangguan Yu had experienced this. For a moment, he didn't know what to do. He just looked at Shen Yu Kai and listened to the whistling wind and his painful cries. He didn't know whether he should hug him or not. He just stood there, not knowing what to do. Shen Yu Kai didn't feel him hugging her for a long time. She was so scared that she took the initiative to grab his hand and hug herself as they fell. Shangguan Yu, I'm warning you, when we reach the bottom, you'll fall under me and be my cushion. It doesn't matter if you're smashed to pieces, but even if I die, I want to die a beautiful death. I can't die like a piece of meat. You, Brother Yu Kai, let go of me. I can send you up. Aside from letting go, Shen Yu Kai did not believe him at all. Although he did not want to die, and if he had a second chance, he would not have jumped off the cliff so impulsively. However, there were not so many chances to do so. Chapter 441. He almost burst into tears, wiping his tears and snot on Shangguan Yu's body. Shangguan Yu, do you think I dare to let go of you in this situation? I'm heavier than you and I'll fall faster than you. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. You want me to be your human cushion? You want to fall to the ground yourself? I'll fuck your grandma. You'd better give up on this idea as soon as possible. Let me tell you, I'll never let you get what you want. Shen Yu Kai deeply felt that his little universe was about to explode at this moment. Damn Shangguan Yu, I'm going to die with him, but he still has such an idea. He buried his head in Garin's chest and cried, my poor father and mother, they really have to send off their son. Sob sob, I don't know if they will shed a few tears after I die, or if they will hold a big banquet, thinking that they can finally stop worrying after I die. Sob sob sob. Brother Yu Kai, Shangguan Yu was speechless as he looked at the back of his head, crying in his arms and gasping for breath. If you let go of me now, I can really send you up. If you wait any longer, it'll be too late. I'm the one who wants to die. I don't want to drag you down. You're the only son of uncle and aunt. You're not the only son of the Shangguan family. Shangguan Yu was rendered speechless by him. After a long time, he silently looked at the cliff above. I've made up my mind. Brother Yu Kai, you don't need to persuade me anymore. I've made up my mind, too. If you dare to let go of me, I'll keep jumping. I'm heavier than you anyway, and I'll fall faster than you. Hearing his half-threatening tone, Shangguan Yu, who was about to stop him, paused. He looked at him and sighed silently. Brother Yu Kai, if you're unwell, even if I meet Jia in the underworld, I won't be able to face her. She hates me. Please don't make things difficult for me. Sob, the problem is that you can't see her down there. We can only see the king of hell down there. Brother Yu Kai, Shangguan Yu, why didn't you believe what I said? I already said that Jia is not dead. Jia knows what she's doing. She was prepared before she did this. But you fucking tricked me to death. I'm really going to die. Bang. As Shen Yu Kai complained, there was a sudden bang. What happened to them? With both feet on the ground, Shen Yu Kai bounced a few times on the ground. He looked at Shangguan Yu in disbelief, then looked at Shangguan Yu again. Just like him, Shangguan Yu, who was also safe and sound, revealed a surprised expression when he saw that the other party's expression was the same as his. The Broken Heart Cliff was so high that falling from the top would definitely result in one's death. However, not only were they fine, they even landed safely. Not only that, didn't they land a little too quickly? Shin Yu Kai looked at his feet suspiciously and was shocked. There was no ground at all. There was clearly a layer of hazy fog below, and he couldn't see anything clearly. It was really scary to look at. Cough, cough, the sound of coughing came from behind them. Shin Yu Kai and Shangguan Yu looked back at the same time and saw Jichu covering his mouth and looking at them awkwardly. Shin Yu Kai also thought of the position he and Shangguan Yu were in now. The two of them were hugging each other, with his hand holding Shangguan Yu's collar and Shangguan Yu's arms around his waist. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.